now for the exciting stuff. Like we've been talking about this for a long time, so I'm really, really excited to turn the time over to our speaker today. We're going to welcome JT, founder and CEO of JT Willie Designs, as well as founder of JT Willie Designs and CEO of Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise. So thank you for coming, JT. Let me turn the time over to you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Yat a nikidideshnit ado shiji a jetuli a inshia ado tkapaha inshnedo tkachini a baschin a shihin a dashachino kiani dashanale ado she bahasla a daisi a nasha ado a shananishigi a inlay taga hotzana de shananishkolong inlay nabahoba nalya hepahogan a daisi bahyaniki at shananish selin ado a Sheinchka a Masters of Public Administration Shayospa Nle Bedi Dasane the University of New Mexico. Ado Adeya, I am working on my my PhD in doctoral of business administration. So I just wanted to say good morning to everybody and thank you very much for joining in today. Also, thank you very much to Change Labs for this initiative and putting this program together, and also the invitation to participate with you all today. Majority of my presentation is going to be based on getting ready for market. A lot of us know the steps to prepare for market from step A and all the way through step B, being present at a show, a market, what have you. But what I'm going to go through today is going to be a series of preparation from A to B. There's many steps that takes place in order to get to a show. So today's presentation is built on the foundations of getting market ready and what tools can I offer you, or information, advice, whatever I can provide to you to get to that point to become market ready. As we move forward, I did prepare a presentation, so I'll be going through the presentation and sharing with you different objectives as I go there. But again, I'd just like to thank you all for joining us today. Like I said, my name's JT Willie. I come from Twin Lakes, New Mexico. It was a very snowy drive this morning. We actually were pretty hesitant to get on the road, but once you hit coal mine, there was nothing this way. So we were like, wow, there's actually no snow in Western Navajo. But we are glad to join you today. I'm actually accompanied with my mother today. And as my mom always comes with me to different shows, I also brought her today with me on this presentation. So as we move forward here, and I'm also the current CEO with Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise, established since 1941. What I do in that capacity, was selected 2 years ago, and I'm going into my third year actually with Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise, working with them and selected to lead the industry forward in the area of art when it comes to the Navajo Nation plus fellow Native American artists throughout the United States. But today's presentation will be based off of my company and what I have established as JT Willie Designs since 2003. So with that being said, I would like to pull up the slide here and then start going into the presentation. There is also a printable handout that I did provide that can be printed and used as a checkoff list. And this checkoff list is basically all the tools and necessities that I could gather and put together that will be useful for preparing for a show. I pretty much have been doing jewelry for over the past 20 years. Participating in art shows, being present at different art shows. And in that respect, it didn't just happen overnight. A lot of the learning lessons for me in preparing for shows, pretty much at this time, now going into probably like my 21st, 22nd year of doing art shows, 12 years actually, it's expanded very much for me. And so now moving forward, what I like to call preparation for the preparation. A lot of us like to think that preparing for a show begins at, showing up and coming with everything and ready to go. There's a lot of steps that need to take place in order to get to that point. And what I want to provide for you today are resources that will allow us to prepare for those shows. Now, in my respect, I've done shows in the ideals that I'm able to only do certain shows a year. I first started my career starting shows in the mindset that I have to be participating at every show possible. Can we bring it back to the full screen so you can see the backdrop and what I have set up for now? kind of jumped the gun a little bit, but I just wanted to show you where things are at now. Pretty much at this point, and the goal that I wanted to get to was to get to a point where I'm able to provide presentation for what I do. So everything that you see here before you, I brought this morning and what comes with me to my shows. I'm not a permanent store location. I don't have an infrastructure where I sell out of, but I do shows throughout the year, and I'm able to provide a setup. And so what you see here is the setup that I've come to kind of summarize everything down to. The backdrop is a very important part of my display. Being a marketing major and being in the field of marketing for a number of years, presentation is so important, as well as branding and recognition. So I did bring the backdrop, and it was set up this morning upon arriving. The desk, also another part of presentation, displays all the necessary tools needed to provide for a show. So should you ever find me at a show, my first show of the year is coming up at the Heard Museum the first weekend in March, which is like 3 weeks away. You'll see a similar setup in preparation for that show when I get to that point, and allowing myself to be ready for a lot of these marketing for my customers, as well as displaying my jewelry. As you can see too, the different displays that I have, necklace displays, the mannequin display over there with the big coral branch necklace, mirrors, everything needed to make yourself presentable to your customers. Most importantly, products, what you have as far as photograph everything is necessary in order to prepare for a show. So with that being said, we can go back to the checkoff list and begin with preparation for the preparation. So as we move forward here in preparing for a show, you want to allow yourself to be pre-ready for preparation. Now, the big question you need to ask yourself is, what kind of show am I participating in? Are these shows, is it a juried show? Is it an open application show? How do I find myself to be present at the show? I've been in all these different areas. I've done flea markets, I've done museum shows, I've done gallery shows, I've also done the juried shows. So a lot of these different shows have different aspects when it comes to what you want to see yourself do. At this point in my career, I've come to a point where I've become comfortable with a lot of juried shows. Through the pandemic, when we got open, things started to open back up, I came to flea markets because that was kind of like the only venue and channel for me in order to meet an audience and to sell my product. So what you really want to do is select the right event. Choose one that aligns with your target audience and your goals, and also research different shows, who comes to these shows, and what kind of reputation do these shows have, and is this where you belong? In my area, I do jewelry, I do beadwork, I do accessories, and I used to do apparel, but I kind of closed that door. But my main focus now is jewelry. Navajo style jewelry, more higher end jewelry. And so I researched what kind of shows that I should apply for and participate. So as of this year, my main shows are this coming Heard Museum, the Heard Museum show. My next show is the Santa Fe Indian Market, which happens usually about the 3rd to 4th week of August. So those are my two main shows that I participate in every year, plus the holiday shows. The Navajo Nation Museum in Winter Rock usually hosts a show that sells out within minutes of it being open for application. The two bigger shows, like the Santa Fe Indian Market, and just as a reminder, if you plan to participate in Indian Market this year, the application is still open. You have to go through a jury process. So it's always best to research the preparation for the pre-preparation is to research how these shows accept you. Many times, individuals get motivated to want to participate in a show, come to find out there's a jury process. Example would be the Heard Museum coming up. That show application opened up last fall and to the early winter. And so therefore their application closed, you go through a jury process, and then you get notified if you are an accepted artist of the Heard Museum. The Santa Fe Market, their application process is closing next week. So next week's the deadline. You have to submit application, you have to submit photographs. The next bullet point there, the bold on the bottom of the page is quality photos. acceptance for jury shows usually is done with photo submissions of your work. I always used to question this a lot. Why do I need to take photos and submit those to an organization if they know what I do? Or I'm not specialized in photography, but that's the biggest component that you need. Nowadays, our devices, your cell phone, you're on like what, the iPhone Pro Max, you're on the, I don't know Android too well, but there's a latest Android that came out. Everybody has the best specs in photography and photo capability. So you're able to take nice quality photos, but be sure to allow yourself to recognize that these photographs need to be done in specifics to the organization and how they want you to submit your photos. So photos are big for me. And I always make sure that my main pieces that I've been working on for some time get the most photographs out of them, because you know what happens when you show up to a show and you end up selling that piece. You don't want to try to run around and try to get setting up the taking photographs at the last minute. And we've all done it. I've done it. I've seen people do it. We've been through that process of last minute things. The next process is the application process. Filling out your application, submitting all necessary information, and most importantly, following up on the progress and providing any necessary payments. Many times what I've seen when you see open applications for shows as well as shows that are juried, you get discouraged about fees. Application fees usually run about $25. On the drive over here, we're just talking about how much things cost nowadays. It even costs to have someone review your application nowadays. That kind of separates the demographic of artists. That separates the demographic of who's participating, and it weeds out folks just kind of like looking and providing and whatnot. You want to be able to invest as much as you can and participate as much as you can. So that involves fees. And most of the time, the application fees are like $25. You submit your application, and then therefore you kind of wait to hear back. Once you're accepted, then you have to provide a booth fee. Majority of these booth fees average about $500 for your high-end shows. I've seen some shows run up to $1,000. Your local shows usually run about $10, $5, $20 a day. That's the preliminary payments that you must make when you go through an application process or a process to participate in a show, a flea market, what have you, any kind of venue that you plan to invest yourself in. You have to make those preliminary payments to participate. My most important part, again, and I'll always go back to, is the pre-marketing perspective. Pre-marketing perspectives are very important for artists, especially for show artists. So if you plan to participate more often, you want to do a lot of pre-marketing. A lot of my fellow artists have become very social media friendly because it's been the platform. Since social media has been going crazy. I remember the days when I first started doing shows. My first Santa Fe in the Market show was back in 2010. And that was my first show ever. And I wanted to aim high at the first try. And I actually applied in 2008, 2009, until 2010, I got accepted into the indie market. It was such a big deal to be accepted at that time. That time, there was no social media. It wasn't big. Yeah, I don't know if you remember High Five or the old MySpace, but that was very preliminary of what you see now as far as social media. Social media is the best tool when it's used correctly. Social media is the best outlet when you're able to provide useful information to your audience. I do have social media platforms set up on JT Willie Designs on Facebook. I also have the Instagram under JT Willie. There is also a TikTok on how I do my jewelry making process to show and share more about what I do as far as who I am as a designer and as an artist. The other tool that's always been useful for me is a website. I know websites can be very dreadful for many because you got to take time to build the websites. But if you're able to find someone to build it on your behalf, even better. Nowadays, there's a new technology called AI. AI, artificial intelligence, you're able to provide all this information to an AI platform that will build these mechanisms for you. Very scary. It is very scary because I've tried them. And coming from my background in marketing, I'm a more traditional marketer as compared to depending on a lot of these technologies now. But I'm finding that those venues and channels have a lot more opportunity for my outreach. You want to be able to also share your progress on your show. So if you're a subscriber on any of my platforms, you probably see that I'm preparing for the Herd Museum now. You're probably seeing me in the shop working on jewelry. You're probably seeing some small clips of me putting some purses together, stringing a necklace. I'm preparing my audience for anticipation. I'm building up the anticipation. And I bolded this last bullet point checkoff box because you want to be able to get your audience excited and prepared to see you at your show. It pays off very much. The more pre-work that you do before you get to a show. I'll share an example. One year during Santa Fe Indoor Market, I was getting ready for the show and I didn't know I had, a good following at that time. But we arrived in Santa Fe for the first day. And if you're a visitor of the Indoor Market, those shows start at like before the sun even comes up. And back in the day, we showed up at my booth and there was already people waiting for me. And I thought, this is crazy. And it was very motivating at the same time to know that I was able to build up the anticipation to get someone to stand there and wait. It got to the point where she was waiting for us to take the jewelry out of the box before they even made it on the displays, before the display was even put up. She already started buying from me. So that anticipation in preparing for these shows is a big must, and it does pay off in the end, whether it's through an immediate purchase. I'm getting inventory ready now, but I'm not telling my mom, but I've already sold some of those things. She's already told me we're not going to have anything to sell when we get to the herd. I know, I get that, yeah, but we'll make more. We'll make more, and we'll be excited by the time we get there, and people will see what I have for sale. But I did started to sell some things already because some folks can't make it to some of these shows as well. So that's where social media comes into play when it comes to your preparation for the preparation to arrive to a show. So we do all those things, we finish our inventory, we prepare ourselves, and then finally the preparation begins. Now is the time where you must set your standards for what you're going to do next. Now at this point, you open up yourself to get to the show. Now at this point, going back to the displays and everything like that, we're going to talk about all that moving forward. So now what really helps me in all that I do, whether it's career, whether it's professional, educational, family, personal, anything, is to define your goals. What are your goals to get to this point? It's a very important area to begin. Determine what you want to achieve at the show. What is it you want to sell? What are your leads? What are your brand awareness? What else is there that you want to bring to the show? What is it that you want to be able to share with your audience, with your new clients, with your current clients, with anything that you want to do in preparation for these shows? Pretty much the obvious is to make money. You want to make money, but when it comes time to make money, you want to be able to provide quality products. So, in line with that, you want to be able to also budget. Budgeting is very important in anything that we do, especially nowadays, moving on from the COVID-19 pandemic. People are more careful with their spending. And so what I do, what I make is a luxury item. You can choose to buy my product, but you don't need my product. But my job is to make you want my product. That's the marketing side of things. So in order to get to those points, I got to be very careful how I budget and how I prepare for my shows. At this time, like I said, when I first started doing shows, I was doing like 2 shows a month, 3 shows a month. I was on the road continuously at the very beginning of my artist career when I started doing shows. I traveled to like California, traveled throughout Arizona, New Mexico, went to the East Coast to Washington, D.C. So there was all these opportunities to market myself and put my product out there. And that was at the very beginning when I started this mechanism of doing shows and applying for higher end shows, juried shows. So in all of that, it's most important to me is to allow myself to budget myself to get to that point, and also reinvest in what I do. So you want to include, most important, like I said at the beginning, your fees. How much does it cost to be here? What is the hotel cost? What are my travel expenses? Am I going to pay for a plane ticket? Am I going to pay for gas? All of those things associated with your event are very important to take into perspective. Now we're getting ready to go down to Phoenix pretty soon. So, yesterday the hotel got booked, the Airbnb. I tried to get Airbnb, but I ran out of an opportunity there. So I had to get a hotel. They cost more. Those things cost more, and there's more time you have to spend down there. You also have to pay for parking fees. And if you're accepted into some of these shows, you're let in free. But of course, you might have to pay for someone to be there with you. So if you plan to bring a relative, family, someone to help you, you might have to pay for them to be in attendance as well. You have to be able to pay for your marketing, depending on what you want to do and what you want to market: business cards, backdrops, things you want to hand out, the boxes with the jewelry, everything that goes online in preparation for a show. So then the next ones I want to talk about is you traveled, you researched, you prepared, you budgeted. Now is what you need to do, and what I've learned, and I discipline myself to do this, is to design your booth. Designing your booth is like this is your store. So in preparation for coming here today, I wanted to be able to get to a point where I'm able to provide good presentation. And so I brought everything. I brought everything with me. And I was telling Raquel earlier, I'm glad I'm doing this, because in a couple weeks, I got to get ready for the Herd Museum. And I finally went through all my displays since Christmas, because I haven't done anything since Christmas time. So now I'm able to go through all of my stuff and get it ready for a show. But what I've learned a lot is that less is more, and more is too much on your first check mark. You want to bring everything, but at the same time, it becomes too much. So the less you bring, the more it is. I do jewelry, and so I'm able to pack the jewelry into just one bag, and I can bring that with me wherever I go. But now that I'm doing bags again, purses, accessories, jewelry bags, I'm going to have to bring another bag for those things. So I got to prepare myself for these shows, because as you can see, when you saw the screen or whether you're here in person, it takes a lot of things to provide presentation. It takes a desk, it takes a table, it takes a backdrop, mannequins, what have you. All these things add up to space. Depending on what kind of transportation you have or how you're getting to these shows, it takes up space to be there. The next check marks are, of course, the table. A comfortable chair is always needed, because I bought so many chairs because I left the folding chairs at home and I had to buy new chairs again. So that was always a stop we had to make. Displays, as I said, displays are important. And then creating eye-catching and inviting eye-catching and inviting booths that reflect your identity. So of course, my logo, my name, my designs, the pictures, considering the layout. Look at the layout that you want to have. How much space do you have? Make sure you're not invading someone else's space, because we do get stingy with our spaces when we go to these shows, especially when it's a 5x10 space. You want to get every opportunity to do your marketing. Ensure your booth design allows for easy flow of your customers. You don't want people coming behind you. You don't want people getting into an area that you have money kept or you're storing things. You want to be able to have a setup that's presentable, but it allows your customers to see what you have and things are not hidden throughout your booth. Very important, snacks. Snacks are important: candy, fruit, water, etc. for your guests. The guests that are coming into your space, welcoming them to come in. And also, again, each person that visits you to your booth, you want to treat them well. You want to be able to allow them to be welcomed here. And can I go back to the full display just one more time? I want to share some more details about this area. So as I mentioned, I do jewelry. The number one thing someone needs when they want to buy jewelry or look at jewelry is a mirror. The number one tool ever. We fight over this at wherever you sell because the person next to you probably didn't bring the mirror and they're going to ask you to borrow your mirror. This is the most demanded asset when it comes to jewelry if you do sell jewelry and you plan to sell jewelry. As I said, displays are very important. They allow your inventory to be shown at a different level and also add that extra touch to what you do as an artist. Yeah, you could just lay everything out here, but you know, in the convenience of the customer, you want to be able to provide a very high level setting. So like, for example, I have the desk and it sits at my waist. So when I look down, I can see everything without having to look lower at a table. Now, what happens if you go to a show and they provide you a table, a basic plastic 6-foot table, 4-foot table? The best tool, these guys. PVC pipe, the best thing ever when it comes to those tables. Because I can't haul a table across the state sometimes, the show usually provides a table. And so these, I take 4 of them, cut them to a certain length, and I use them to prop the table on through the legs of the table. The best tool ever, the best invention ever. I didn't invent this. I learned this from watching other well-skilled artists and their setups. And I thought that is such a good idea. So, and I was asking Raquel, do you have any white tables? She mentioned she just has the pretty fancy tables here. And I love these tables. I might take one from you. But you're able to prop your folding tables on here and put a nice blanket over it. Usually we buy a velveteen crushed velvet material at Joann's or whatever fabric store is local and just drape that over the table and cover up the legs. And it adds height to the table. It brings it up to a presentable level for your customers so they're not in a point where they're trying to look and see the jewelry and what have you. So PVC pipe, add that to your checkout list. It's a necessary item when it comes to displaying and showing your jewelry. Now you show up at the show, but you have to get all of this to your booth. At a flea market, you're able to pull up, back up, open the back, unload everything and set it up. That's easy. That's convenient. Get the 10 by 10 tent, prop that up, put the table under, take everything out from the back of the ride, and you're set up. But what happens when you go to a show and it's probably about half a mile away from your vehicle? How do you get to that point of getting all of this to your booth? That takes a lot of learning. I'll let you know. And it took a lot of hauling of inventory through the downtown streets of Los Angeles to get to this point. And I say that because as I took my mom with me to the shows, Bajo Baya, I had my mom carrying a desk across the streets of California to get to my booth. The best other tool that will get you to the point A to point B at a show, is a wagon. The best friend of any vendor or artist out there. It's a foldable wagon. You can find these at Walmart. You can order them online. You can find them at Costco. You can find it at Sam's Club. But this wagon saves us many trips to get from the vehicle to the booth and back safely. I tried crates, you know, the crates that you fold up and you put everything on top. That's the worst thing ever, because what happens when you hit pavement and the pavement ends at a certain point, all of that stuff's going to fly off the cart. And it's happened to us. It's happened going down Central at the Heard Museum in front. Everything just like flew, and we had to grab everything and put it back on the car and race ourselves back across the street. So these all break down. The table breaks down, it folds. The displays, they all go in a big box. I didn't bring that trunk in with me, but it took a lot to get this display here. And I always think to myself, because I do a lot of, I analytically think about things, is like, why does it take all of this to get that necklace displayed. Presentation. You want to be able to provide presentation for what you do in order to get to point A to point B. It adds extra, it adds your touch to what you do, how you market yourself at these shows. In preparations for shows, packing your jewelry, boxes are best tool necessary in order to pack your jewelry. So in preparation for your shows, packing your boxes, stackable boxes are best. Closable boxes that lock, not ones that have the simple plastic lid on, then they come off once the box moves, but something that latches and secures is always best for carrying jewelry. The necklaces here were transported in these boxes and were put on display. As I mentioned, snacks. You want to welcome your guests, so always have snacks available for your guests in order for them to feel welcomed and also something for them to take, because most of your buyers show up with families. So when they bring their families, children get a little impatient, and you want to be able to provide the children with a snack as well. And sometimes a doggy treat if you're at a show where there's dogs in attendance, and you can provide the dog treats, bottles of water, anything that allows convenience for your client to be welcomed at your show. Another thing, hand sanitizer. We're at that point where we moved on from a pandemic. We're more aware of cleanliness. So therefore, hand sanitizer is always very important. I go to the point of providing fragrance within my booth too. So I have an air freshener that I spray around wherever I'm at, just to add that extra. Because when people show up, they're like, it smells so good right here. And they want to stay, just because it smells good. And then, of course, a box. I didn't organize this because I would have been lying to you, but I put this together. And this is my show box. This never gets organized. I just know where everything's at. Everything's in there. I have like tape. I have scissors. I have markers. I have cleaning rags. I have jewelry, bags. I have everything. Clothespins. I have safety pins, lotion, sunblock. Everything's in here in order for me to be ready for a show. Now, what happens when I'm at a show and there's no Wi-Fi, or I don't have availability of internet and I use the POS system on my phone? I use Square, and so the phone dies. So I have a backup terminal that I'm able to provide and guarantee a sale when it comes time for those shows. So that's just the booth design preparation. I have the backdrop here. It did take some investments to purchase the backdrops. It did take investment again to buy the displays. But when you get to that point where you're able to invest money into these products, it pays off so well that you're able to have a better presentation for all of your customers. I added my logo. I had a Rodnez Woodworks, Navo-owned business that does my displays. I brought the smallest one that I could, but he imprinted my logo on this here, and I usually display this at my booth. I have another wooden table that I also take with me. I have it outside. I didn't bring it in, but that's also made by Steamboat Woodworks, Mr. Coeur d'Alene Begay out of Steamboat, Arizona. He also designed my tabletop that goes to shows with me. So we can go back to the checkoff list now. The checkoff list, at this point, we designed our booth. We know how we're going to set up. Now getting everything to that booth. The next one is your stock of inventory, ensuring you have enough inventory and product to meet the demand of the event. This is a very complicated area just because we don't know some of these shows. And I've learned a formula very well to know that I need to make enough inventory to supply me for like a 2-day show. But the pandemic happened. And so post-pandemic, that formula has changed for me. So I've taken extra steps to analyze the traffic, the marketing, the expenses, and how much it costs to make my product. So ensuring that I have enough inventory to be present at these shows, bringing extra inventory in case, and I'm able to, if I do sell out, I have more inventory ready to go. And then lastly, what's most important in this section of stocking your inventory is to know your product, what they're made of, and the worth of that product. Now, what happens in this area is that many times when a customer comes to you, they're going to want to know what you made your product of. So I'll probably get someone who's going to come and they're going to ask, how much is this necklace? Well, I'm at a point now in my career where I'm able to produce a 25 strand shaka coral necklace for $15,000. So that's how much this necklace is. I'm able to get to a point now where the product I carry is mostly high end when I go to these bigger shows, but I got to know my product. Because what happens if a collector or anyone comes in, anybody, and the coral necklaces, my biggest customers are, of course, Navajo. Our Navajo people are my best customers when it comes to coral, because you know the worth of a coral and you know the history, the lineage, whether it's part of your clans, how it ties in with our creation here as Navajo people. So the more information that you know about your product, the more you're able to know your customer is confident in what you have. So of course, this is a 25 strand shaka coral necklace. Shaka coral is Italian coral. It comes from the Mediterranean. All of it's handmade. So the cones are sterling silver. The beads are also handmade. I make everything, the hooks, the latches, everything's all handmade on this product. 100% as much as I could. I didn't make the coral. If I made the coral, then I wouldn't be here. Just kidding. But this is all important in order to market to your customers. It allows your customers to feel confident in what you have. If you're selling turquoise, the biggest question I always get, what kind of turquoise is that? Where did you get it at? So from your sources, wherever you find your material to get to this point, you want to have all that in line so that when you sell your product, you know what you're selling. You know, what kind of material is that? What does the 8-band mean? Where does it come from? Is it American broadcloth? Does your customer know that this cloth runs about $120 a yard? You want to share that information to them because you want to be able to get the worth for what you sell. You want to be able to market your product to a point where you're comfortable and your customer is also comfortable in how much they're investing into you as an artist, whether it's high end, whether it's low end, whether it's a simple pair of, $20 earrings. It's always best to know what you sell. My biggest pet peeve as an artist ever is someone that just sits there. My biggest pet peeve as an artist that I've experienced at these shows, whether it's a high-end show, whether it's at the flea market, anywhere, is when someone just sits there and the customer walks up. That is the worst thing you can ever do. And I just always think, how do you treat people that come see you on a daily basis? How do you treat your family? How do you treat friends? How do you treat relatives that engage with you? Do you treat them in that same manner? This is very different here. These people don't know you, and you want to be able to create relationships with these folks. So every time, and you can ask my mother who goes to me with all these shows, I'm always standing. I never sit down. Once I sit down, I'm lazy after that. I always do my best to stand up and always be engaged with my customers because I want them to know I'm invested in them being here too. I'm glad that they took time to get here because as much as it cost me the budget to get here, it cost them just as much to get here and also be here and to also, invest some money into who I am as an artist. So now moving on into the presentation on the check mark there. This was the last one that I bolded because it's most important to me. And it's also an area that I feel is important to you when it comes to allowing yourself to be present and to market yourself at these shows. So moving on to the next section here. Yeah, back to the presentation. Moving on to the next section of the checkoff list. You want to be able to market and promote. Marketing and promotion, promoting that you're participating in this show. I mentioned that in your pre-preparations as well. Social media is the best outlet, email, website. it's very difficult sometimes to channel people to get a hold of you. And I experienced this a lot. Creating visually appealing promotional material such as banners, flyers, business cards are very important. So business cards, as I will always iterate, should be one of your top investments. And I underline this because this is important for you. Business cards are your connection and your tool to your clients at these shows. It has all your information on there, your website, your email, if you're comfortable, your phone number. At this point in my career, the only tool that I give them is my website. Go to jtwillie.com. You'll find all my contact information on there. If in the case where the client, the customer does not have access to those necessities, then I'm able to write everything down. I have a blank space on back to write everything so that the customer can get a hold of me. So it's always important to keep an marketing opportunity open for your clientele to get a hold of you. The next section here is the most important. Again, everything's important, but staffing. I call this staffing because professionally, staffing is always important, whether it's family, friends, or colleagues. As I said, staffing in my case is usually my mom. It's usually a close friend of mine. So I determine, how many people can fit in the booth, because many times these booth locations are probably the maximum you'll ever get to 10 by 10, and there's not a lot of space. So you want to be able to be mindful of your space so that you have room to function, you have room to display, you're able to be present with your customers. But when these folks are with you, you want to be able to make sure that they know who you are. Obviously, they want to know what kind of product you sell. They want to know how much things cost. They also want to know what you know, because in the case where you're helping somebody over here, you have your relative or whoever is with you on the other side assisting customers at the same time. You might need to take a break. You might need to get something to eat. You might be busy with a client who wants more attention from you. So in those cases, your staffing, your family, your friends are there to step in and provide more opportunity to make those sales for you. So you want to be able to train them. And if you step away, take your phone, stay in close contact, because you might need to come back because that person made a sale, and you want to be able to be within a certain range to come back and to guarantee the sale, because you might be the only person that can do the cash out, whether it's cash, whether it's through your phone on a POS system. Moving on to the next section here is very important for payments. I've experienced this firsthand on setting up a reliable payment system, a system that's very efficient for you and workable for you. A payment system that will allow you to track your sales, because you want to be able to know how much you made. When I first started doing shows, I used to have a simple invoice book, recorded all my sales. And then, of course, with the advancement of technology, I'm able to record them on my phone. I'm able to run it through a POS system that records all of my sales, whether it's credit cards, whether it's a check, whether it's cash. It logs all my sales for me. So at the end of the show, I'm reconciling my books and I'm able to see how much I made through the show. I can, analyze that with my budget and look at my revenue, look at my expenses. I underlined the next one, which is cash. And some of us folks still do cash. We still carry cash, because if you are an attendee to some of these bigger shows, like the Indian Market, like the Gallagher Nations is coming up in Albuquerque, you have the Herd Museum, you have the state fairs coming up. When you bring that many people together, you lose service. Winter Rock is notorious for this during the fair. Everyone shows up and you lose service. You don't get signal unless you're on a dependable Wi-Fi connection. So at that point, everything changes to cash. At that point, you have to run on a manual process and process your payments by cash. And I've learned that some of these participants who come to shows, not participants, but the customers that come to these shows, they budget themselves. And if you're like me, once I have a plastic card, no, I'll just pay pay, pay. And also I get a message from Wells Fargo saying declined, there's no more money in there. But that's what happens. People overspend when it's on your debit card. So what I've noticed with some of these folks that I got to know, they bring cash, they set it aside, then they show up with the cash. Cash is a little sketchy. In that case, in my little box here, I have a counterfeit pin for my high bills. So from $20 on up, I mark my bills just to make sure they're real. And I want to make sure that I don't get cheated because there's a lot of counterfeit money that gets flowed around. So you want to be able to be prepared with change, have a separate envelope set aside or a box set aside for your change, because at that point you have to provide change back to your client when they want to pay. Because sometimes when we price an item, we don't think of them buying multiple products and then you add it up and it comes out to 120 and they give you 200 and you have to find $80. So you're trying to like scramble around and look for $80. And I know, and I get this vibe from other artists, but sometimes we don't like to support each other. So when it comes to things like the mirror, you get really stingy and you get stingy with your money too. So you're just like, oh, I don't have change. Then you have a whole wad of money sitting right there and you're like, I don't have change. I'm sorry. But it gets to that point. So you really have to depend on yourself when it comes to being present at these shows. The last one is invoices and receipts. Invoicing and receipts for your clients. I do have some customers that want a receipt. I'm able to go to my POS system on my phone and I'll be like, I can text you my receipt. And some will say, perfect, that works. And I'm usually that person. But others will be like, no, I want a handwritten receipt. And usually, if it's a handwritten receipt, I have my postcards ready to go. They're blank on the back. I'm able to write in what I sold, how much it cost, how did they pay, how much they gave me, the change they got back, and then I sign the bottom, and that's their receipt. That's the easiest way around this if you don't have a receipt book. The carbon copy where you have to take the 3 copies and tear it out. If you have that, then perfect. I don't know how many of those I've been through, but I leave them everywhere. So I've come to a point where I'm able to just use my business card as a receipt on the back, give them another one for their keepsake and the other one for their records. So the receipt's written on back of the card. So receipts and invoices, the most important thing when it comes to your payment processing. Demonstration and presentation. This is the next section. I underlined the first checkoff box. Prepare a compelling and informative presentation of your products or services. Depending on what kind of show you're doing or who comes visit you, like I said earlier, you want to know your product, you want to know what you sell, you want to share more about you. You want to engage with your audience a lot better so they become, comfortable with you, they get to know you, you share where you come from. It's easy for us to do, because you could spend forever on an introduction and just talk about your upbringing. And that's always been my connection with my customers and knowing where I come from, who I come from, who my parents are, who my grandparents are. You want to be able to also provide the history behind what you do. The number one question I'm always asked as an artist is, why do you make the naja? What does the naja represent? So I had to do my research, check back on what is the naja and how did it come here? What is the history behind it? There's a traditional side, there's the modern side from the conquistadors and the Spaniards that came to the region and they migrated the naja that used to be part of a bridle on a horse bridle, and they traded horses with Navajos, and the Navajos took the naja, put it on a leather strap, and that symbolized how many horses belonged to that person. They would trade it and trade it off. You've probably seen some old photos of the women who used to wear the bead, and they used to pin the najas at the top of the bead, and that also represented how many horses she had and traded it off with somebody else. The traditional side, of course, has to do with the male and female, the emergent story. There's different aspects about the jewelry that we make and the connection it has to our identity. The doiji, the turquoise that we use, yotlachigi, who wears the yotlachigi, Where does it come from? How did it emerge here? The story of the beads, the story of handmade beads, how that started from when the soldiers came around, when we were being taken to Bosque Redondo, soldering those coins or those soldiers' buttons from their jackets together to make beads. That's also a technique from long ago that's been changed and passed down from generation. And now you have different style of beads that are formed. So the more information that you share with your audience, the more connection that they have with you. I'm an artist that started in beadwork. My forte has always been beadwork. I've always done beadwork, and I've learned beadwork through going to college. I became good friends with folks that came from the Southern Plains. They moved to Albuquerque, the Kiowas, the Comanche, the Oto, and I learned that style from them. But I added a Navajo flair. So when you see my product, I put it in sterling silver, and I share that the silver is passed down from generations to generations. So I was able to learn this from my Che, and not even knowing that I was learning that process of silver making. And so I expanded the style of combining two mediums together and what I do as an artist. So as you can see, the tulip design is a floral design that I've become known for. And of course, the sterling silver setting of that beadwork inside of the silver there. So you can see the silver back, my stamping on the back, and then on the front side, you have the tulip design. And this is a purse ornament. You could also probably pin it on your denim jeans if you wanted to on the belt strap. So, sharing and knowing how your product can be wearable and usable. This is easy for me to talk about jewelry. It's a lot different when it comes to different diverse arts. Other folks have to learn and materialize how the use of their product is. So that's pretty much the background and marketing side and of what you do and the product that you sell. Moving on in the presentation, the next section I have is customer engagement. Customer engagement is very important for your customers, and I just mentioned all of this mostly, but developing a strategy for engaging your attendees, being presentable, being approachable, being knowledgeable about what you're doing, it adds up to what you provide and who you are as an artist, as a small business. Collecting contact information is very important. Collecting contact information allows you to keep an open channel with a lot of your clientele. So right now, I probably have about 4,000, close to 5,000 contacts. And that's years of just gathering information. And what I do around this time, aside from social media, I'm able to provide leads to them. I'm able to send them an email. I'm able to send them a text message like, hey, Happy New Year. Hope you and your family are well. I'd have to also, some of them, I used to send them a letter in the mail. I used to send a postcard. I have some clients coming down to the herd, so I'm preparing gifts for them. Engagement with my clients, knowing that we have a continuous relationship. They're investors in my business. I use the words investors compared to buyers or buying, just because of my professional realm and how I've developed professionally. It allows me to understand our relationship better. And so collecting information is very important. The one I underlined in this section is donations and contributions to the event. Majority of the times, these shows, events have an opportunity for you to donate or contribute. You want to be able to donate and have an item ready. You want to have an item ready to go because someone's going to come around from the organizer and they're going to ask, by the way, we're raising money for this cause. Would you like to contribute? And so right away, I have something set aside and ready to go to donate to the cause. There's usually silent auctions that are hosted for bigger shows. The Santa Fe Market has a big auction that takes place Saturday night of In the Market. And leading up to In the Market, they ask you, would you like to donate? I don't know how the mathematics works on the application side of things. I'm so grateful to be accepted every year. This will be my 13th year in Santa Fe. And so I make it a point to donate because I don't know. I don't know if they have my history on a file in the office and it says, "Oh yeah, he donated here, he donated here, he donated here." You know what? He didn't donate at all. Don't let him in. You never know. You don't know that. So I want to make sure that I'm on good terms in some sense with some organizers because I like to get invited back. I like to participate. I want to be accepted. Yes, my art will get me in the show, but I want to be able to donate to the cause at the same time. It is also very important to engage with your fellow artists or business. You will need to network with some of these folks who are in the same arena as you. So in my area, I mostly have learned, observed, and mentored with other artists who do jewelry and who do beadwork. I've connected with diverse artists because I feel like what we experience is the same. What we all know how long it takes to bead something. We all know, the uses of micro beads versus Charlotte cut beads versus tri-cut beads. We could talk about that all day. With silversmiths, I could talk to them about soldering methods, types of turquoise, heat levels, different torches, diamond settings. I could learn from them, goldsmiths. All my other artists, sculptors, weavers, those folks, we engage mostly buying because we're from different channels of art. But with those folks, you learn how much they have to invest in what they do at the same time. How you all are relatable to each other is obviously, you want to get some investors to invest into your product, but at the same time, you all have to get from point A to point B together. You all have to cross that street together to get to that show. You all have to put a display together. You all have to prepare presentations. You have to budget. You have to expend. You have to follow up. You have to put everything together to engage yourself in these shows. All of you share that together. And so my fellow artists, whether it's a jeweler, whether it's a sculptor, a weaver, I'm able to relate to them on that level and mentor from them. What they do is probably a little bit more simpler than what I do. If you met me back in 2010 to 2015, you probably would see a whole bunch of boxes laying all over the place because I wasn't this simple with what I was doing with displays. You would have probably seen me going back and forth, hauling everything in one by one and preparing this setup for you. Nowadays, I've engaged with my fellow artists to learn simpler ways to do what I do. Believe it or not, but this backdrop fits in a box that's this small. It's a small box. All of this shrinks down because somebody shared with me the resource on finding someone who prints these and able to collapse this back down to a smaller piece. So your resources for what you do are very important to you, and your fellow artists who are more experienced have a lot of knowledge when it comes to setting up a booth and the basic tools and necessities that you need for your booth spaces. So moving on into the presentation, we went through the marketing, we went through the setup, we went through engagement. Very important, timing. And I capitalize timing because timing is very important. The first checkoff is underlined. If you are on time, you are late. If you are early, you are on time. That's very important. And I've seen my fellow artists fail at this many times. I failed at it at the beginning, making myself late, not learning the logistics of getting myself to point A to point B, arriving at least an hour or two before the show opens. And there are usually previews at these shows. When you get to the flea market as well, you show up and people are already walking the flea market and you're kind of like, I'm already behind. I got to get set up and get ready to go. At the bigger shows, you're at a point where you're timing out. You have to hurry. There's parking. There's no more parking. The parking's gone. You have to be able to map out your plan to prepare yourself for these shows. Should you, for any reason, break down early, it should be because you have sold out. But even at that point, if you sold out and they don't have time to bring in another artist to fill your space, share your marketing material, share what you have as far as your business card, sit there, engage with people. And, you know, it's awesome to sell out at some of these shows because you're able to take extra money and buy from other people too. So always arrive early and allow yourself to know what you need to prepare yourself for these shows. The biggest pet peeve again is seeing someone who arrives late. Sometimes when you're at it, and I always think that like, gosh, it costs money for us to all be here. You pay for an ad, you pay for the hotel, you pay for all of these things, and you're not here on time. And there's an empty booth next to you, there's an empty booth somewhere. And also you see them running in and they're trying to set up and there's a bunch of people just walking around and they look at you and that's the first thing they think is like, wow, they're not ready yet, so I'll probably look somewhere else. Early bird catches the worm, as they always say. So always make yourself prepared and on time and as early as you can to be here, to be where you need to be when it comes to presentation and most importantly selling your product. The logistics. The logistics are all of the background information again to get where you need to go. So from going to timing to your logistics, you want to be able to plan for your transportation, plan for the booth setup, plan for the breakdown. How do you get to where you need to go? Are you a first-time artist in Santa Fe? Do you really want to stay in Santa Fe? Are you ready to pay that much money to stay in Santa Fe? At the very beginning of my art career, I was commuting from Albuquerque to Santa Fe because it was cheaper to stay in Santa Fe. It's still just as expensive to stay at some of these places. The closer you get to the venue, the more expensive things cost. The further you're away, the cheaper it is. The more time you have to take to get to where you need to be. So you want to ensure that you have all necessary equipment, all necessary tables, always take an extra table, always take extra chairs, all the technology that you need, a backup plan if that technology fails for you. Most important, and I underlined this check mark, was to keep your areas clean and organized. The worst thing that you could see from your fellow artists, yourself, is a dirty space. And when you see that, that's not a good presentation for your clientele, because when they see that, they're just kind of like, their attention is on all your things laying around in your booth than on you and your product. You want all the attention on the product, less the mess. If you were to come back here, you're going to see all the stuff that I threw under here on this desk. You want to hide that as much as you can. You want to be able to put everything else away because you want to engage with your client. I probably wouldn't have this out. I probably wouldn't leave this. If I had this sitting right here, what are you going to pay more attention to? This or the coral necklace? You're going to probably want to look through all this stuff, right, and see what's in there. So you want to be able to keep the mess away, keep it organized, and don't allow yourself to get to a point where everything else is a mess around you because it doesn't show good presentation and you lose sight of what you're actually there for. And your client is more attentive to what mess you have laying around. So as much as you can, keep things organized and keep things clean. Therefore, that's why in this checkoff list, I underlined this section as an important area to remind yourself. Save securing your booth with tarps or with other methods. So if you're planning to be at this show and it's like a 2-day show, it's a 4-day show, it's a 2-week show, whatever, securing that booth. So usually, if I'm at the flea market, that ends at the end of the day, all of this can go back and go home. But if I'm away on travel at a show like the one coming up, there's a 10 by 10 space provided, but that's it. I have to secure everything else myself. All of the jewelry usually stays with me, goes back to the hotel. The inventory goes back. Displays go back in their cases. I don't want to just leave everything, kind of just laying out, because when you lay everything out and you don't secure your booth space, you end up an opportunity for theft. It has happened. It's easier for open shows for that to happen. So securing your booth space and knowing what you need to secure it with. Tarps have been my one of the assets that I use. Tarps, in case the weather, if it rains, the tarps are there. At night, if I have to stay overnight and I have to leave everything, I usually put everything together and wrap it up in a tarp. I don't know what magic a tarp has, but I just hope no one gets into the tarp. So I leave it there with the spongy wrap so nobody gets into it. Is it theft preventable? No. It's the best method that I've learned to secure it. I don't leave the inventory at these shows. Food. You want to be able to make sure food is easy for yourself, for anyone who is there to help you. Food is important. Food is, and don't forget about yourself when it comes to food. Making sure that you have food with you, whether it's snacks. I've learned, for me, that doesn't work. We pack food, we purchase food, didn't work for us. So I've added this for your information. You'll learn this yourself, whether you should bring your own food or how you should plan to get food. Usually most venues have a vendor that sells food, so you have money set aside to pay for the food and you have food. But what we've done in the past is we've gotten to a point where we've had an ice chest, packed it up with all the food, and it came home with us. Nothing, the bologna stayed in there, the cheese stayed in there, the lettuce stayed in there, the bread, everything wasted. We wasted money doing that. We bought a whole case of water. We didn't even bother that. We bought water from the concession vendor instead. So we've learned, don't pack food. That's best for us because it doesn't work for us. I'm not a coffee drinker, so usually places that I go don't have tea. So I always make sure that I have tea, my hot tea ready to go where I go. We're both not coffee drinkers. So, usually when they have morning breakfast or stuff, the first thing people have is coffee, but we've had alternatives ready, iced tea or hot tea ready. In our case, that's usually the only other alternative we have. The last one, staying hydrated, making sure that you're hydrated, you're energized, you got enough sleep, and you're ready to go. And I've seen my fellow artists kind of, you know, you're the last person you think of. You want to get the sale, you want to take care of your customers, you want to do the setup. You're worried about everybody else but yourself. So I've seen people kind of, push themselves aside a lot. They've stressed themselves in preparation because how many nights did you stay up to get ready for that show? Even for like the flea market show that I usually do, like the Gallup flea market, in preparation for that, it takes time, it takes steps to get ready for them, because you want to have enough inventory, staying up late, going to bed late, getting up early. You put yourself through a lot of stress mentally, physically. You end up eating more takeout food than you do prepare food at home, because I think of timing. Like, I could prepare myself a home cooked meal, but I could just run and grab food. It'll take like 30 minutes. It's going to take me longer because I got to do the dishes. I got to, you run those logistics. I'm the person that does that. So you tend to put yourself aside when you prepare for these shows. Lastly, follow-up plan. You want to be able to take all your notes and follow up. You want to have a follow-up plan in place for the customers. You want to create that relationship, close the sales, provide open opportunities. You want to be able to send thank yous, a thank you email, a promotion, product information. The last one I underlined is to take care of those that have taken care of you. So somebody helped you get there. Some of us can do it by ourselves, but usually it takes people to get you to point A to point B. Usually there is a process that you have to take to get there. So you want to be able to take care of those people that have taken care of you. So, in my case, there's only one person that takes care of me to get there, is my mom. Whether it's like you're driving too slow, slow down. And we're zooming down the road to get to Phoenix, or whether it's making sure I've eaten, making sure I had something to drink. There's always someone that has taken care of you at the show, or whether you're at home preparing for the show. So always take care of the people that have taken care of you, especially your customers. I have one customer that has taken care of me every year, and she has invested a lot of money in my product. So I always make sure when the holiday comes up, I send her something. And she's always the first one to send me something. So I always try to stay ahead. But those customers outside of your family, outside of your friends, you want to take care of them, because especially those returning customers that have spent a lot of money on you and your product, you want to take care of them. So, for an example, the Herd Museum's coming up. She's going to be there. So I have a fellow artist who's a quilter making a quilt for me. And I plan to take that with a sheep herder special to share my appreciation to her. She doesn't know what a sheep herder special is, right? She's Bilagana from Oregon, but I'm going to take this to her because it's how I grew up. And she loves that. She's all about it. She's just like, I love everything about you and who you are. So make sure to take care of those that have taken care of you. The next section here is to evaluate your performance. After the show, you want to be able to evaluate your performance based on your goals and your budget. Did I spend too much money? Did I overspend? Did I underspend? How much did I make? Did I meet all my goals? Did I sell all of my inventory? Those sorts of things come into place when it comes to evaluating how you presented yourself. Gather feedback from other people. Talk to people who came to come see your booth that did I do okay? What's your opinion? I want to know the honest truth. Even ask your customers, like, were you welcome? Did you feel welcome? If my customers cash out through my POS system that I have set up online, they get a survey and they're able to fill out the survey, and I can see what they say, was a product of quality. Were you greeted? Was there customer service? Is there any recommendations that you like to make to the person you bought this product from? So always backtrack. Constructive criticism is the best if it's done correctly. Lastly, adjust, improve, and most importantly, reinvest. Using the insights gained from the event to refine your strategy. Do I come back here? Was this not a good idea? Should I go somewhere else? Things happen at the same time. Maybe I won't come back next year. You want to rethink, or for sure, like, I'm coming back next year. This was a good show. I love the atmosphere. I will be back. I bolded and highlighted this next word: invest. Invest your funds in your next show, your new inventory, and your budget. I also bolded the next one: a big no. No vacations, no luxury purchases. Only buy what is needed to improve your performance to increase your sales at your next show. The last one: always pay for your booth fee first. I've run into this. I've done it. I procrastinated. I paid at the 11th hour sometimes when I've had the money available all this time to pay those fees. Do not be that person. Make that your goal to pay those fees first and reinvest. Hard work will pay off later. For me, hard work paid off probably until 2020. 2020, hard work paid off. It took 10 years to get to that point. So moving through the perspectives of reinvesting in yourself, all of the product that you've seen me with, the backdrop, the displays, the fancy desk, the customized logo design, the cards, all of this is from revenue made from my sales. So when I made a sale, money was put aside. If I made a sale, I always thought, okay, a sheet of silver at 18 gauge runs me about 1,500, 1,600, depending on spot price. That's the first thing I know I need to get when I come back. Always make sure you take care of that point first before moving forward. So as I conclude here and we move on to the last section here, what's next? Start all over from step one. Share your experiences openly. Create a database with your contacts on where you will be next, what is new, and always innovate. Innovate who you are, innovate your process, upgrade yourself every time so you're able to provide continuous presentation and always allow yourself to be innovative and have an open mind about who you are and what is set up and also what you can do here. I've added my contact information there, my email plus my website. On the last slide, I just wanted to share with you, for those that can see the presentation, I don't have it on the handout, but I've dedicated some photographs to, my past decade of art. You see where I came from. I was once an artist of the year by the Indian Arts and Crafts Association. I used to do beaded heels. I won best of shows at some of these shows. The very corner photo is my inspiration for how I got to where I am. It's my late grandmother. She was my grandmother's sister. Her name was Pauline. And growing up, she was always on the road. She was everywhere, East Coast, West Coast. I always remember one time we were talking and we asked her, how did you come home from New York? And she said, I just told myself, go west, go west. And she drove west back to Santa Fe, and she lived in Santa Fe. My late grandmother, and also her have left us since. So she's been my inspiration for what I do here. So that concludes my presentation, and I believe we're opening it up for a question and answer session.
We do.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Yeah, pause here into the city. So I'm going to start with the first question. This is, does this setup change for outside and inside showing? Which I think you talked a little bit about in this presentation. So what to keep in mind for the elements, which I think you reiterated.
Yeah.
Is a great thing.
Correct.
The pipes as well.
Yeah. So yeah, the setup does change. Usually, and if you pull it up to the camera again, the desk here, it's a carpeted desk. So this is usually just for my indoor shows. So I usually don't take this to an outdoor show. It collects a lot of dust too. So usually if I'm at the flea market, I use a folding table compared to the desk. If I'm doing like a show in Santa Fe is an outdoor show too. So that one's always a folding table. If I do Santa Fe, that will be a folding table. If I'm indoor at a gallery or at a museum somewhere, then I change to the carpeted desk. For the elements, I always have the tarps available no matter what, because you never know it's going to rain. We have a bunch of snow on that side, so we showed up in snow boots today. There's no snow over here, so we didn't prepare for that, So always being prepared for a change up. The current setup, and I run this setup every 2 years. So this will be the look for this year. Next year, I plan to change it all to hardwood. So I change the look of the displays every time. Okay, I'm good. I've used my POS system has always been Square. Square has been easy for me to engage all of my sales, but I know back home on the res, not everywhere has good cell phone service. So I'm able to backdate my Square, able to make sure I can have an offline setting set up on my POS system. I've used other POS systems, and Square has been my most useful for me. Find the money wise, as far as how much it costs to have Square, does cost a little bit more. So you want to be able to make sure that you're using Square efficiently. An example that I see a lot of is when it comes to Square, some folks have the card reader. The card reader, they plug that into the phone. Sometimes this don't work. So now with the debit cards, credit cards, there's a tap to pay, and you're able to just put it on your phone, depending what kind of phone you have. So if you're up to date on the software, the technology, you're able to use tap to pay or other things for POS systems. Going back to cash again, it's always been my number one venue for sales, because I'm able to have that guaranteed sale, money set aside, and I'm able to write up receipts manually when it comes to cash sales.
For everybody. So we talked a little bit about cash. Like, what would you kind of recommend of a starting cash amount to take, especially to your first show? I know there's like different ranges depending on if you're selling like very high priced jewelry to also essentially like if you're selling like stickers or something like that. So like in your experience, do dollar bills work really well? Is it great to have like maybe like 320s or something like that?
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So yeah, thank you for that question. So when it comes to the type of cash on hand, if depending on which show I'm at, so let's start with a local show. Usually those shows, even the high end, I make sure that I have my increments in fives. So like a number of fives, a number of tens, a number of 20s, and in some cases hundreds. But usually the max cash that I take on hand is about 1,000. 500 is high $100, and then the rest is smaller bills. It allows me to have extra money on hand to make sure that I'm able to cash out customers. But if a vendor, like for example, if a concession vendor takes cash only, then I have cash on hand. Don't tell my mom that because she always buys the food. So never mind. You didn't hear that, mom. So I want to make sure that I have extra cash on hand to meet those customers. But I never do dollars. I've learned to price my items in increments of 5. So for example, if I'm making a product and my ring that I made comes out to $22 after everything, or like $44 or what have you, I round up. Or if I'm close to rounding down and I can afford that, then I round down. It's gonna get complicated when it comes to taxes. So taxes is the other thing. Usually if I'm in the jurisdiction, I'll be in the jurisdiction of the city of Phoenix and the county of Maricopa next 2-3 weeks from now. My items are priced with a window of taxes. So when it comes to cashing out my customer, I don't tell them this is going to be $5,500, 62 cents. I'm able to round it, adding on those additional costs. So when it comes time to cashing out on my books, I bring it down to whatever that price is minus the taxes from that final price. So that's how I usually price my items at some of the shows that require tax. So I stay in an even number area. On my books, I have a tax account set up. That's probably for a different discussion, but in preparation, this is also part of preparation, is when you get to the point where you're at that point of it becomes a revenue stream for you, you set up these accounts so you're able to put extra money aside and pull from that when it comes time for taxes. So when I pay my taxes to the county, to the state, to the city, I pull from that based off of the revenues and the percentages for each one of those jurisdictions when it comes to tax at the time of cash out on the end.
This is for the people on Zoom. So we have a couple questions from our audience that's here at the eShip Hub. So one is, how should an artist dress at a show? Yeah, what's your comment on that?
Show up in a t-shirt. I'm just kidding. No, it really depends. And I don't want to say you should dress up. You should show up in a blazer. You should wear beads. You should wear jewelry. I don't want to show that because I want your customers to be engaged with who you are. So if you're the person that shows up and you're used and that's how you dress, show up like that. That's your personality. That's who you are. I grew up in a very strict household, so I always refer back to my upbringing. My grandma used to always say, "Hey, agent if I had a little bracelet on." So I always made sure, you know, she will always say that to me. So you'll never see me without beads. You'll never see me without a ring, without a bracelet. I always have to have one of these or all of it together at one time. In my professional career now too, blazer, #1 asset for me. Nice shoes, but they're killing me right now. So it's part of presentation. You want to be comfortable. So these will change after I leave here. If I was at a show, these will become my New Balance shoes, so I'm more comfortable. But you want to be able to present yourself to who you are, to your audience, so they know you. People know me like this, so I'll always, if I probably showed up at a show with just like my workout t-shirt on, they'll probably be like, what happened to you? You know, you want to be able to keep that repertoire, but I don't want you to, I always tell this to people, don't show up in like a ball gown or big tuxedo, and that's not who you are. You're going to be so uncomfortable that you're more worried about how you're dressed compared to what you represent here. What you represent here is who you are. So show up in that manner.
So we have another question too. How do you communicate with a customer that disagrees with what you say your product is made out of? Examples, the type of turquoise, silver, and coral.
Thank you. Had a number of those. And it's interesting because I'm always questioned by my own people. I'm always questioned by my own relatives. It's always them. It's the best though, because I'm just like, I'm ready to take you on and we can talk about this all day. Because I learn about it. I've learned my process and I know what I have. And so we, it's just a matter of just sitting down and talking about it. I'm very anti-social media when it becomes that. When it comes to like sharing that on social media, disagreements, it's like, can we do it the old way and let's sit down and talk about it? That's the best way to handle these situations. So when it comes to those sorts of questions, I just take it with an open mind, provide, what I know, what I've been taught, where I got my stones, how I made my stones, where they came from. When it comes from a non-native, and I've had that too, because when I first started doing art, I've had folks come to me and tell me, this isn't Navajo. I learned from the book. And I'm like, okay, the book taught me that Navajos only make this kind of jewelry. How come you're doing beadwork? They don't know that diversity of who we are as Indigenous people and the connectivity that we have with other tribal nations nowadays. So it takes time to educate. So it's same mechanism, sitting down, talking, educating, and hearing it from you firsthand because you know what you're talking about. It gets to a point of comfort to where they recognize and accept your point of view and accept who you are as a person.
Take the mic and I'll give it back to you. So we have another question that is, how do you lock in a sale and avoid the I will come back response?
Yeah, I will come back. Usually means I'm not coming back. Thank you for letting me know though. So we'll see you later. But how I usually lock in a sale depends on what the product is and also depends on the behavior of the customer. So if I feel like the customer spent enough time in my area and they're interested in the product, I try to share more information about the product. And then at the same time, usually get asked the question, do you do discounts? Then I start talking about, well, it took this much time, effort to get to this point here. And they become comfortable with the price after that. But you still get folks who are not sure and they want to leave. So usually at that point, I don't take any more effort to lock in those sales. But if it's, for an example, if it's a person who's very serious and they actually put on the product and they're wearing it, they have the earrings on, they have the ring on, they have the bracelet on, they're looking at the purse in the mirror, that's when you know I got to lock in the sale. They really want the product. So maybe I'll work with you on a price. Maybe I'll drop the price just a little to where it's affordable for me. I've had folks try to lowball me a lot, bringing down $10,000 to $500. And it was like, do you really know what it takes to get to this point? So I have to take more time and effort to get to that point. And I've actually been able to lock in a full price item with just communication. Yeah.
Another one. So we have another one that is like, do you have a method to pricing your products? Possibly tracking your actual tools, materials, and how many hours you have put in working on the product. Therefore, you know how much to mark up profitability of each of your pieces.
Thank you for that question. I have a system set up, and I was mentioning to the ladies earlier that I have a cloud system set up that I need to get organized. But what I do with everything that I purchase, I put it into a spreadsheet and I lay out that spreadsheet with my costs and everything's put in place. So I'm able to analyze my bottom down costs and then prepare for my markups. My markups depend on how much time that I invested because I don't pay for my time, I pay by markup. So I take the total costs of the product. So say for example, total costs on this product is there's sterling silver here, there's handmade beads, there's handmade conchos, there's beadwork added, and the broadcloth is a higher end American trade wool broadcloth, and it's also lined with cotton. So doing the bag itself, just the bag part with the handle is also not prefabricated. It's also sewn. So I actually ran it through a sewing machine and did the leather work and did everything to finish the handle. So the final cost on this bag here is at $600, and that's at markup. And that's including the base price of all the material, the sterling silver, the beadwork, the cloth, the leather, the cotton of the product, and added to a final price here for what I have at 600. So I take my base and I add a markup. I won't share my markup at this time, but my markup is dependent on the type of item I make. So the accessories markup is different. These markups are different compared to the jewelry markups, because majority of the price on some of my pieces, including the raw materials, is in the cost of the raw material itself as compared to the labor it took to put this together. So I didn't make the coral, Mother Nature made the coral, but the coral has been fabricated into the tube shapes here. So this carries most of the weight. Just to share with you, the bottom price of just the strands from the vendor to me before I made everything else ran at $6,500. That was my investment into this. So I invested $6,500 on the coral itself. I restrung it, added the silver tubings, put everything together, made the beads. So the total cost that I came up to is $10,000. But I know that I probably won't be selling this, so I'm gonna probably break this up so it becomes more affordable. The branch over there is $20,000. So that's still in its form. The beads, again, those are Sleeping Beauty beads that are vintage from the 1960s, from the first batch. That's also probably not going to sell at full price, so I have to break it down and make it affordable for my client, because most of my costs is not the silver that I put into it or the assembly of it. It was the cost to get it to that point, polished from rough and kept in its natural form. The bigger branches that you don't see anymore, I have to take all those into consideration for these higher end items. For items that are mostly silver and mostly from like the stamp pieces that you see here, those have a different markup because it comes from the base point of the type of silver I use. The silver I use is probably like 16 gauge, 14 gauge, 18 gauge. Those are heavier silvers. If there's custom prices to want to work with my client, I'm able to make something similar at a lighter gauge. We like to do things by weight. So we tend to do this a lot to see how heavy it is. And that's how we base our price. So that's how I channeled my inventory to be at, weight acceptance. That's how we used to do it a long time ago. So compared to now, we want to be more affordable. But when it comes to being affordable, the gauge gets thinner, it's lighter, and that's when people get discouraged, like, I don't know if this is real silver. And you're just like, it's real, it's just the cost nowadays. So it really depends on the channel that I work with.
Thank you so much for that presentation and those thoughtful answers to our questions from our participants. I'm going to pass it back off to Raquel.
And thank you, JT, for that awesome presentation. Oh my gosh, I learned so much. And I feel like this presentation can also apply not just to artisans, but also service providers. So in our audience, I see we have Change Labs alumni, Valerie. We also have Change Lab alumni Delphine. We have Amber Hillis, who's a professional service provider as well. We have Joseph Baya, and they all aren't necessarily in the artist industry, but they can also take away a lot of really great insight from this, especially when it comes to setting up booths at like Navajo Nation Economic Development conferences, the RES conferences, and almost any conference that you're going to promote yourself and your business. And I just want to share my screen one more time. Okay, so this first one is just another outline of the rest of this week's event. So thank you again to JT for your awesome presentation. Tomorrow we have Jeremy Arviso presenting as well. And hopefully we're keeping our fingers crossed that the weather is gracious enough that he'll be here with us in person as well today. So everybody who's here in person can definitely join again here at the eShip Hub in Tuba City. And then let me share another screen. And we'll be sharing more information about Jeremy tomorrow. If you can't really read the screen or if you need to get going, don't feel bad about that part. I hope you guys are keeping warm out there, and we will hopefully see you tomorrow. So have a great day.